Thank you so much, Mr. Ivanov. I'm really glad and happy to be today back in Macedonia. I was here for the last time five years ago, I suppose, and I met President Ivanov and his son, Mr. Ivanov Jr. in Morocco some months ago, and I'm glad to have been invited. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Mr. Domfried, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be at such a nice panel with President Klaus, President Ivanov, Mr. Tuomi Oja, and the former president of Albania. Before speaking about cultural diplomacy, I'd like to share basically three thoughts about how the world functions and what we could do to make it a better place. Macedonia is the paradigm of how the world works, because you have been basically, since your independence, a victim of realpolitik. You even, as Mr. Klaus mentioned, you don't have the right to call your country Macedonia. Now your country is called Northern Macedonia. Why is it so? Because in this world, and it will stay like that unfortunately, what dominates human societies and relations between nations is the will to power. That's a basic principle. Each of us wants to move forward, so it's the will to power. And if you look at the Bible, it starts with the Bible. So God says to Eve, don't eat from that fruit. And the serpent says, I'll quote, the serpent says, basically, I don't know where I put it, for God knows that when you eat from that fruit, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And Eve, the will to power, wants to eat from that fruit. She wants to be like God and know what is good and what is evil. So, why am I saying this? We have to be realistic. We have to understand that not even in our countries, in our societies, international relations, there's always a fight for dominance. And what we have right now, very openly, we have a strong competition. Competition means what? Will to power. A competition between basically the US and China, and also between the US and Russia. Not, I mean, to a larger extent, of course, between the US and China. And China has become a threat to the US. And now what we're witnessing is the possibility of a confrontation between the US and China, because China has the ambition to replace, in the long run, the US to be, and this is now my second thought, to be a hegemon. Because the US is still the only true hegemon in this world. And China wants to be a hegemon, which is natural, a natural ambition and natural tendency, and the Americans will do all they can to prevent them from becoming a hegemon in East Asia and thereby in the world. So can we prevent the US and China from confronting each other militarily? I do not know if we can do that. But what we can do is we can try to use perhaps cultural diplomacy to smoothen things, to mitigate things. And one of the recent examples how you can succeed, thus far it has worked, is, for instance, the use of cultural diplomacy by the Brits. So there's a rift, still a rift, I would say, between the US and Europe. And Keir Starmer visits the White House. And what do, the Brits? they invite Mr. Trump to come to pay a state visit for a second time to the UK to mitigate things. That's a method of cultural diplomacy. And we are, in a certain way, condemned to resort to that kind of methods because we are not a hard power, speaking of Europe. We cannot, on our own, stop the Russians from progressing in Ukraine. We cannot do that. We don't have the means for that. The only ones who have the means to stop the Russians are the Americans. But they will not use these means because of the danger of having a nuclear war. So, nuclear cultural diplomacy, yes, we should use that. Can we become stronger in Europe? Can we become a global player, Europe in general? Yes, under one condition. If we have a hegemon in Europe, so if there is a country in Europe dictating things, Europe, the European Union, could become a global player, meaning political union. Is that acceptable to our American friends? That Europe becomes a global player and that there's a hegemon on the continent? No. It is not realistic and it will not happen. The only two countries on the continent which can become a hegemon, theoretically, are France or Germany. Under Mrs. Merkel, with the financial crisis and the migration crisis, Germany was the informal hegemon of the European Union. It is not the case anymore right now. In the institutions, the Germans dominate, but they're not really as strong anymore as it was the case 5, 10 years ago. We could become more independent if we had energy self-sufficiency, which is not the case. So we are condemned to use cultural diplomacy. We are condemned to be a part of the West, led by the Americans. And what we should do is we should use our skills, as it was the case, for instance, in the Vatican the other day, when Mr. Zelensky had a conversation with Mr. Trump. It was possible and only in the Vatican. We should do such things to make the relationship better between Europe and the US, and also do all we can to prevent a global confrontation between the US and China. Blagodaram. Thank you.